press Control. Now in Streamlabs Desk button, Group, and Stream button. You are currently on a button inside of web content.
Welcome back to another episode of Blind Proofing, everybody.
Safari, 18, CHIL, now in, speech chat, window, reload page. Speech, 75% low.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I think we're,
text entry area, blank. T-E-T-N-G, testing, 1, 2, 3, 123 exclamation.
At blindfolded proof, testing 123, said.
Woo.
Streamlabs desktop, Safari, pages, 39, Streamlabs desktop, Safari, Finder, recents, window, now in, volume 1 Why Humans Don't Get, now in, iCloud Drive, window, status bar, icon view, GarageBand for documents, icon view, Epistem Fall, ending endless, shared, blind proof, and endless Isake, the life of Symphony Omen, icon view, vol 1, folder, actions available, icon view, chapter 1 focus, pages document, actions available, you are currently on a pages document. To open, press Control, Option, space to begin interacting.
Hello, said.
Oh, hello. Welcome to the channel. I am starting to wonder if I need some sort of like way for it to say the name of the person and then wait a second before it says their comment. If I can figure that out, it'll make it easier for people to engage with me, so I'm going to work on that before next stream. But for now, we have
pages,
focus.
Now in body, page 1 of 3, edit text, content selected body, chapter 1, focus, actions available, format text quickly by voice.
I am glad to be live. Thank you for being amazing and joining the channel today. Oh, I gotta start doing this, by the way, guys, because I haven't been actually showing you the results of the experiment, and I feel like this is a very big part of it, so let me do that really fast for you. RoyalRoad. Okay, so this is the 4th chapter for Symphony Omen being posted today. Chapter 4 is being posted today. I'm only posting once a week, so I'm the reason why I'm doing it this way is because I'm trying to show people that even if you don't post a lot of content, you're still gonna gain a following. You're still gonna find people that want to read what you have to say. You're gonna find people with your interest. So yeah, this is week 4 of this, and let's pull this up.
Speech on Epistems across the middle. Epistems of Omens and Omnis, Volume 1, A Rumor of Angels.
Of Omens and Omnis.
Video. Download button.
At Kid Could Be 1VN. I really enjoy your reading, said.
Wow, I thank you very much. That means a lot to me.
Speech on overview. Club original. Lit RPG, Portal Fantasy, Urban Fantasy, Progression, Club, Mature Profanity, Join Symphony Omen, the forgotten child of the family known for its alignment with the children of the fallen, or more commonly called, Angels, of Archmagic. Continue reading, button, 83.
We have 83 reads on this, and it's only week 4.
Total views, 21.
So, each week I've gotten an average of 21 views on just this story.
Average views, 0. Followers.
We got 0 followers.
Favorites.
And 0 favorites. Okay, so the reason why I want to show this from the beginning, because realistically a month isn't a lot of time to be writing. And these chapters probably took me, if I'm being honest with you guys, probably like a day of writing. I probably got through maybe 2 or 3 days at the most. most people who are writing probably going to have a lot more time like I used to. So it is what it is. But there is a lot of ebbs and flows for me. I've understood that. There's times where I have an incredible amount of time to write and I get an incredible amount of writing done. Or there's times where I just, I'll get a few thousand words a day comparatively to like 10 that I'm closer to being used to, just because once I know what needs to get put out, it's a lot easier for me to do. And if you guys want, videos on like how to, plot out a story, develop your characters, develop your world, develop your, like, I'm already going to do all those things on the channel, but if you want more things specifically, just ask for those things and I'll definitely start to pump out more content for you guys for that, because I do have a streaming day on Saturday and Sunday that is not directly for this RoyalRoad experiment. It's just going to be for like writing Ending Endless and putting out other stories that I've let go to the wayside, like the life of Aurora Drake Imperial. I love that story and I cannot wait to get back to it. So yeah. Yep. Oh god, we're ready.
Copy.
Chapter 1.
Speech muted.
Focus. Symphony couldn't sleep. Not that sleep came easily for him normally, but with the added excitement of his wielding day on the horizon, he gave up on rest entirely. I wonder if a sword... No, wait, I hope a bow chooses me, declared Symphony. The 7-season cycle-old boy practiced with many weapons in order to familiarize himself with cultivator instruments. His father told him that he should dedicate himself to a single item to increase his odds of being claimed by a weapon-based instrument. So instead of the singular focus adopted by his peers and even the noble-born scions of Aspire, Symphony attempted to become a jack of all trades. He hoped being experienced in multiple instrument styles would make him more inclined to receive a weapon. His practice had only recently showed promise, but most of his gained prowess was hidden to all but himself, a secret he wanted to keep for many reasons. At first he was ridiculed for his attempts to take on every type of combat and trade by everyone. Guards laughed at his poor stances in the local training yard. Townspeople laughed at his every failed attempt to become a crafter's apprentice. Even his family laughed at his subpar grades in school with the exclusion of his father. Symphony's father believed that with time his son would grow into the same type of disciplined merchant that he himself was, while Symphony hoped to one day be considered the greatest wizard alive. Either that, or swordsman, maybe a spear. Symphony did push-ups while he tried to read a book on runes. His thoughts on wielding day left him distracted to the point that he realized he didn't remember much of what he'd just read. So he closed the book that lay across the chest at the end of his small cot and gave his full attention to his exercise. "I have to be in perfect condition for my instrument," said Symphony. He closed his mind off to all his distractions, and the burn from the push-ups drifted away. Unlike the rest of the children his age, Symphony didn't have personalized trainers, an excess of funds being used toward his development by his parents, nor was his family known to have a particularly strong bloodline talent. It wasn't that his parents didn't care about him, more that the government didn't allow for families with more than 6 children to be sponsored. His 6 older siblings had a claim to the family name, all inheritances involved, and may even one day be able to raise their family into their society's elite or nobility, the honor-born. This was Symphony's greatest motivation. No, he could not bring honor to his family in the same way that his brothers and sisters could, but that left him free of certain responsibilities. Responsibilities that Symphony didn't want or need if he was going to one day build the town of magic and knowledge as he often dreamed of doing. Not that you aren't as far as you could possibly be from that goal, Sim. The scions of the nobles were pumped full of potions, pills, and nurtured by any artifact, relic, or equipment their families could acquire, all in hopes that a wielded cultivator instrument would merge without complication. Due to how normally volatile effects caused by a bloodline's fusion with the instrument and the mana infusion ritual could be, any edge gained to survive the process was seen as a boon. What Symphony hoped for was a complete union between him and his instrument. More often than not, a cultivator chose their instrument, but to be chosen by a perfect match was beyond rare. So rare, in fact, that Symphony worried over the warnings his father had given him. Some instruments could become sentient if they were wielded by their perfect match. The only problem with that was that it mostly occurred in noble houses, and with instruments that had been connected to their families for generations. All of the instruments wielded by the Omen family had either been given to his siblings or were wielded by his parents or his father's brothers. All were merchants, and none struggled financially. Makes me wish I would have been forced to join a sect, or been put up for adoption. Maybe then at least it would seem like I have parents, and wouldn't have to do everything on my own. Not that he truly minded hard work or challenges. The odds were stacked against him, which meant he didn't have an instrument designated for him and his future like his siblings, or the other scions of the noble and wealthy. He would have to pick from the relics left behind by dead cultivators, and that was if he even survived the mana infusion that killed millions his age across the continent. Should I have saved for a tuned sword instead? He spoke aloud as he contemplated. With each question asked internally, another push-up was accomplished. He sweat as time passed, and only grew tired after his 300th repetition. He dug deep and closed his eyes, as he didn't want to give up until he'd reached his absolute limit. More time passed, and Symphony didn't register the sound of the morning rooster, nor the sun that pierced through the window of his small shack behind his family's home. Pa, Symphony hasn't left, and is going to be late for his ceremony. Symphony flinched at what he heard and opened his eyes. The sight of his cluttered room filled his vision. A cot, small desk, and his unorganized cabinet for clothes greeted him as always, alongside a true dread that came with what he knew would come if his mother saw the messy area. The only other item that filled the room was his chest of treasures, and Symphony was captivated momentarily by the heavy lockbox when its white gold trim was touched by sunlight. It was the only present he'd ever received from his parents. According to his father, the chest had once stored his grandfather's most precious items, which Symphony assumed that for a wizard and merchant of the highest orders were potentially priceless relics and trinkets. For Symphony, the box stored everything he loved, all of his books on magic, combat, and the ways of currency. A shield, bow, and broken short spear. All the silvers he owned, and even an empty mana core. The large box was filled with all kinds of items that Symphony had collected since his birth, even as he stashed clothes and his tomes on various professions into the box in an attempt to clean his room before any of his siblings could report the mess to his mother. Symphony felt bad for how roughly he treated his only treasure. "Doesn't matter, dummy, especially if Mother skins you alive for this room," said Symphony in the same moment his door was kicked open. "What are you doing? The ceremony begins any moment, phony," hollered his eldest sister. Symphony's door nearly came free of the wall as Alexandria strode in foot first, and even though it was his property being damaged, he still knew somehow that the situation would lead to his own punishment. He forced down his anger at being called phony and tried to respond. "My door?" He was cut off as the young woman that was nearly identical to his mother entered. Tall, black-haired, and blue-eyed, his sister was a force to be reckoned with. "Shut it, runt. You are going to be late, and if Mother beats you to the ceremony, you know you are going to pay," said Alexandria. "What, Mom's actually going to my ceremony?" asked Symphony. His older sister shrugged before her head jerked toward the town center's clock tower. The bell rang to indicate the start to the Wielding Day's ceremony, and both the siblings groaned in annoyance. Symphony glanced at his treasure chest, and was lucky that his sister didn't notice the half-open lid. Symphony coughed and gestured at himself in his half-dressed state in an attempt to distract and evade trouble. His sister rolled her eyes at him after she gave him a quick once-over. "Hurry up, phony!" His sister disappeared the next moment, and Symphony hurried to finish cleaning and put on his clothes. By the time he was done, Symphony had soaked his best clothes in sweat and had to push aside his anxiety at being late. An intangible pressure weighed down on his shoulders that was only made worse by the town bell that hadn't stopped its ringing. Symphony finally finished his chores within the room and looked around before he ran out of the shack. He noticed the lid to his chest was slightly ajar and rushed over to press close the lid. He tried to force it down to latch the lock closed, only for the chest to push further open. He groaned as a dozen silver coins rolled free of the lid and onto the floor. He scooped and pocketed the coins before he sat on the top of the chest. His weight wasn't enough, so Symphony tried to bounce up and down until the latch clasped over the lock. No matter how much he bounced, pushed down, or tried to wiggle the latch closed by force, nothing worked. In his desperation, he looked around the shack and found his long-abandoned riding saddle. He ignored the item at first, but the ring in the background made him frantic enough to try anything. He managed to wrap the old saddle and its straps around the chest. The straps were stretched to the limits, but the leverage he gained when he managed to fasten them closed brought the lid half a hand from being shut. He grunted, but couldn't give up, as he knew there would be hell to pay if his mess was seen hidden in this manner. After more than a dozen tries to push close the chest, he eventually got so frustrated that he tuned out the sound of the bell in the distance, climbed atop the chest's lid, and jumped. In hindsight, Symphony noted to himself that he could have damaged the box that he valued so highly, but what occurred instead was far better than any other result, even if Symphony would later believe otherwise. The final bell for the ceremony chimed, and the wielding day mana stone was broken. Symphony's gaze shot toward the center of town, and for a moment he felt as if time froze. He was mid-air, and the call of mana that came with the nearby ritual drew on the attention. All mortals, cultivators, and especially non-wielders like him, were practically forced to look as the energy of the gods rushed out to touch all who would accept its embrace. Those at the dawn of their 7th season cycle were primed for the mana infusion necessary to become a cultivator and wielder of a godly instrument. A wave of mana rippled through the small town within the kingdom of Aspire in a breath, and many new cultivators were born, while many mortals lost their lives, unable to withstand the mana their bodies attempted to drink. Symphony was struck by the blue energy the moment he managed to land and push his treasure chest closed. The latch folded over the lock with a clap, and his victory was stolen from him before he could even celebrate. He slipped on the rounded top, and before he knew what happened, his head struck the treasure chest and knocked him unconscious. It was in that moment that Symphony was chosen by an ancient artifact as its wielder, and became the first of his family to be chosen by his family's own bloodline artifact. The treasure chest drained the mana from the air in a violent storm of energy, while it also transformed inside and outside. The blackened wood transitioned from a chipped and mangled surface to smooth and polished. The metal trim changed from rusted to peerless, and even its size changed. Any who could have witnessed the change would have been shocked to see the completely full chest shrink from the size of a small table to the size of a lawman's briefcase. Even more, the relic grew straps and reduced the weight of all items stored within by almost 100%. Simultaneously, Symphony's own body went through a change. The mana in the environment flooded not only his instrument, but his own body. Normally, the youth would be surrounded by responsible adults that could both prevent the harm caused by mana that entered the body for the first time, and help the new cultivator with the seizures caused by a cultivator's bloodline fusion with their instrument. 3 things determined how violent the experience was, which were the age of the cultivator's instrument, their bloodline talent, and whatever skill, core, or ability was created by the fusion process. Unluckily for Symphony, his family not only held an ancient and unknown bloodline, he'd been chosen by an ancient artifact, a powerful enough relic to change the path of both him and his family forever. The town bell started to ring again, and Symphony slowly began to rouse himself. Boxes began to pop up into his vision, but disappeared each time he blinked to clear his vision. Overlay unlocked. All system basic features can now be accessed. Blink. Bloodline unlocked. Rule breaker. All instrument limitations can either be removed or quantifiably changed. Blink. Instrument unlocked. Treasure chest of the Pantologist lexicon. This interdimensional bag can be upgraded without end. Requires fuel and material specific to upgrade individual features. Blink. Fusion skill unlocked. Endless legacy. Access to all cultivator classes have been locked. Access to skills witnessed by the cultivator has been granted as the skill, learning, mimic, and all class-based skill restrictions have been removed, alongside their level minimums to be used. The Godling class, Master of All, has been granted, and all skill level maximums have also been removed. Blink. Symphony rose to his feet slowly, completely unaware of the near weightless wooden and metal backpack on his shoulders. He blinked away yet another notification. One of many boxes that would never be seen again, nor interacted with as an overlay's messages all were. Overlay skill unlocked. Mana slots. Stored items lower maximum mana to be stored. Until item is removed, the mana used to store the item will be unusable. Blink. Overlay skill unlocked. Vault of tomes. All stored books, tomes, written works of art or data can be accessed with a single thought. Blink. The core lessons given to all cultivators, washed away in a single action. Had he been in his ceremony, he'd have been warned not to blink until he'd selected his notifications, or changed how they were organized and stored in his mind through the functions of his overlay. Instead, all of the god's instructions were wiped away with every attempt to clear the fog from his eyes. He rubbed at the knot at the back of his head and groaned in pain. Sparking fool, you probably going to be left with the trash instruments left over by the rest, cursed Symphony to himself. His eyes were closed when he received his final notification, but it too was blinked away, and thought to be a trick of the mind brought on by his excitement over what he thought was to come, even though it already had. Systematic achievement, use more than 99% of the available excess mana, sacrificed to awaken a generation of cultivators. Rule breaker skill activated. Title rewards. 3 instrument ability points granted. This title grants a +2 toward the wielder's point pool. Blink. Countless boons lost in the amount of time it took for Symphony to stand and breathe a few times. Lessons filled with ancestral knowledge that should have been passed down were lost in a flutter of eyelids and each exhalation. Yet, without him knowing, Symphony had begun his life as a cultivator, without harm or ailment. In fact, his body was still being changed by his treasure chest. A box that should have been filled with toys for children to play and grow would now become a child's greatest weapon against the dangers of the world. Then, the town bell began to ring again, but in a way that told him that he may be in a lot of trouble if he didn't get to the center of town quickly and choose an instrument. His weapon to fight against the angels that drank the blood and mana from cultivators' bodies, to stay eternally young, or that plucked people from the earth, never to be seen again. Come on, Symphony. Playtime is over.
Whew. Yeah, I'm excited because a lot of the similarities that you're gonna see in the characters are for like the Trinity kind of aspect that you need to be the Dragon Phoenix. The rule breaker in your overlay is one of them. I'm not gonna give them all. I'm just gonna give tidbits, but yeah. Let us go to
Speech unmuted.
2.
Close. Body. Page 5 of 5. Edit text. Finder. Finder. Vol 1. Window. Now in. Volume 1 Why Humans Don't. Status bar. Icon view. Collection. Sid Meier Civilization. Sid Meier. Now in. iCloud Drive. Desktop. Documents. Icon view. 0. Whip. Folder. Ending endless. Share. Endless Isekai. The Life of Icarus Gray. Fold. Ending endless. Campod Nature. Endless Isekai. Ending endless. Chronicles of Arson Archon. Endless Isekai. Spell Tank. Endless Isekai. The Life of Arson Omni. Endless Isekai. The Life of Aurora. Endless Isekai. The Life of Icarus Gray. Endless Isekai. The Life of Symphony. Icon view. Vol 1. Folder. Chapter 2 Unbalanced. Pages document. Act pages. Now in. Chapter 2 Unbalanced. Window. Footer. Body. In edit text selection selected body chapter 2. Copy. Actions available. Format text quickly by voiceover jumping to the formatter. You are currently on a text area inside of a page. To enter text in this area, type speech muted.
Greetings, young master, came from many of those.
Speech unmuted. Speech muted.
Waved and rushed by. Mother is going to kill me. Symphony ran as fast as he could, and to his surprise,
Speech unmuted. Page 1 body chapter 2. Unbalanced. Body. Page 1 of 7 body 2. Beginning of text body selected body chap copy. Speech muted.
Chapter 2. Unbalanced. The day did not start as planned for Symphony. He ran through his family's compound, past many of his family members and those who worked for Omenesque Industries. Greetings, young master, came from many of those he passed along his way. Symphony waved and rushed by. Mother is going to kill me. Symphony ran as fast as he could, and to his surprise, he didn't slow down halfway between the compound and town as he normally did. Instead, he pushed past his exhaustion and raced through sections of the forest that surrounded all of Aspire. He couldn't help but smile when he got to the road that led into town. Looks like all that exercise is paying off, said Symphony to himself. He jogged through the edges of town and greeted both those he recognized and those who recognized him. Even though he wasn't one of the claimed children of the Omen family, Symphony may have been the most famous member of the merchants due to his consistent fumbles throughout town. He ripped through the streets as fast as he could. This was something he normally did, but Symphony hadn't ever ran this long in his life without some sort of accident occurring. A misstep that led to him deposited roughly down a set of stairs. or a failed dodge that ended with him flat on his rear after he slammed into the walls that were cultivators that walked through the streets of his hometown. Then Symphony rushed around the final corner before the town's cathedral and almost screamed when he came face to face with a giant colored pane of glass. The giant sheet was being held by two cultivators, obviously, as it was unmistakably made of diamond glass, a material so heavy that most mortals, no matter how hard they trained in their lives, would ever experience lifting. Symphony had the sudden urge to run up the glass pane and vault over the obstacle. His thought was even accompanied by a mental image of him doing exactly that. Even as Symphony took another step forward, he felt within himself that he wasn't going to stop his charge, but a flickered thought of the potential hand and footprints he would leave behind on the expensive material made his inner merchant shudder. Another flash of him came tied to his next step forward, and Symphony saw himself slide beneath the pane. Once he chose the action in his mind, he was filled with a burst of energy. The two cultivators swore when they noticed Symphony, and even tried to lift the pane higher unnecessarily. "Hey, watch where you were going, kid." Symphony slid underneath the pane, and glittering light danced off his face. It wasn't until he was on the other side, unscathed and not being yelled at, that he realized what he'd done. He barely stopped to dust himself off, but did manage to look back at the slightly disgruntled workers. One glared at him, but the other wore a contemplative look before he spoke aloud to his co-worker. "Hey, isn't that the cursed Omen kid?" Symphony tried to ignore the words, but was cut even deeper by the response the other man gave. "Yeah, I think you are right. Phony or something like that," replied the man. Symphony looked forward and focused on the town bell that still rang nearby. "Well, Symphony, you made it," said Symphony to himself. He took in the gathered group of people and quickly found his mother and a few of his siblings. He swept his gaze through the crowd until he found his father and one of his uncles. He kept his head down and made his way past his mother as she spoke with a group of other mothers and fathers. The group was large enough that he was able to make it by his mother without incident, not because she didn't notice him, or glare at him, obviously, as he tried to sneak by, but because she needed to retain an air of grace that nothing, including her son, could disrupt. "I hope all of your children find themselves with instruments that will change the fates of our region as a whole. We are the foundation. Thus our futures will be guided by our youth," said his mother while she kept direct eye contact with Symphony. He trotted by and hoped that his father wasn't as mad as his mother was. His father and uncle stood dressed in luxury and spoke as their long manes of blonde hair whipped in the breeze. His father smiled at him as he approached them. They were at the perimeter of a large graveyard and spoke with many other cultivators, but his father separated from the group to speak to him. "You are late, boy, but there are still good prospects left to be chosen," said his father as he gestured toward the graveyard's entrance. Symphony nodded and walked toward the entrance. He looked back to see his father only a yard behind him and screwed up his face, confused by the man's actions. "You weren't here for the demonstration. This process can be very violent for some. I need to make sure you don't bite your tongue off or blink away your notifications, my son," said his father with an immediate response to his unanswered question. "What's a notification?" "It is a message from the gods, my son. Once you have found your instrument, small blue boxes will enter your vision and give you instructions on how to use your abilities and use the features granted by your overlay. You already know to never speak of our family's bloodline talent, but as for anything else observed in this way, only needs to be as much of a secret as you deem necessary," said his father. Symphony nodded and began his track through the cemetery. "What did you mean by not blinking away my notifications?" They'd walked past many graves, topped with equipment, relics, and even the rare artifact here and there. So as he searched, he asked his father questions. "The boxes that pop up will vanish if you blink without the change of your overlay and its features," responded his father. Symphony asked questions until he'd gotten his father to walk him through the process from beginning to end. Symphony grew excited the deeper they went. It was common knowledge that the deeper in that one traveled, the more rare items there were to be found. Symphony looked near the noble quarter and saw many of his peers and even more scions from the honor-born families. He expected to look at his father and see the same forlorn expression he wore any time they'd spoken about his lack of a family-given instrument. None of his brothers and sisters had ever had to undergo the ceremony, and Symphony felt that it affected his parents somehow. Instead, it was Symphony's father that surprised him with a confused expression of his own. Symphony couldn't tell, but his father seemed to be squinting directly at his back. The moment Symphony looked at his father, though, his eyes snapped up to meet his son's own. His father was most likely searching for his inner spark. He should have one now that the mana stone had been broken. He didn't feel anything but the newfound energy he'd displayed on his run into town that morning, but knew that if he was going to find his perfect match that day, he should soon feel a pull on the new energy being stored within himself. He wanted to pick up swords and bows of long-dead warriors. He even was tempted by a craftsman's toolkit. Not feeling the energy he knew he needed to, he dared not touch anything. This continued on for a while longer before his father broke the silence that grew between them. "Why don't we check out the noble's quarter, son?" Symphony's gaze shot from the group of nearby nobles and toward his father. "But I couldn't possibly..." "No harm in trying, and if any of the nobles give you trouble, I am here and will stop any potential arguments to be had," cut in his father. Symphony nodded simply and made his way deeper. Symphony ignored the stares of the noble scions his age and looked around at the entrances to many crypts or mausoleums. The tombs had various symbols at their entrances to designate the families that rested inside. It wasn't until Symphony saw the side of the tombs almost from floor to ceiling. As far as his family's wealth was concerned, it was unrivaled within the kingdom of Aspire, but to have this much gold just unattended sent alarm bells through Symphony's brain. "Dad, shouldn't we have this all locked up?" He looked back to see the man shake his head. "No, son, this is the wealth of the dead. It can only be obtained on this day or days like it. The entrance requires massive amounts of mana to open," said his father. Symphony digested the information with a nod and restarted his search once more. He'd wanted his father's opinion on what he thought would be good for Symphony, but the man kept silent, even after his son asked a few questions. Each time Symphony looked to the man, he found his father stared at his back. He almost wondered if the man plotted to kill him with how serious his gaze was in his direction after a while. Then his mind flickered, and he realized he still hadn't chosen an instrument, or been chosen, which potentially put him in a category of half-mortal that Symphony was desperate not to be a part of. At last, he came to a room that held an odd pressure. Symphony didn't see his father's extended arm try and stop him from entering, but a sound like snapped rope made a tension in his head ease. Similar to when his family had vacationed in the mountains last summer, and he felt his ears pop when they descended down the path to come home. Once inside, Symphony felt pulled in every direction imaginable. He took in the room full of relics and gasped. He stood frozen in the entryway until his father joined him. "It feels like I am being called by every item in here, father," said Symphony. "Then choose my son." Symphony didn't realize his father hadn't truly entered the room and had left him to explore alone. Symphony walked slowly through the room and had to force himself not to touch every item he saw. Eventually, he stopped in front of a sword that floated and rotated above a cluster of mana crystals in their rawest form. The relic was unlike any instrument he'd seen before. It seemed to be carved from tip to handle in runes and pulsed with the same golden white light it must have been made from. This couldn't be an unbound mana construct, could it? Even as Symphony asked the question, he reached for the blade. Its hard light material gleamed like steel made of illumination and energy. "You won't be able to use that unless..." started his father, but Symphony heard none of the words as he took the sword into his left hand. The moment he grasped the blade's handle, a red box popped into his vision, and Symphony read the words aloud. "Unbound blade of universe. This weapon is without affinity and holds no skills, can only be bound to an awoken cultivator. This blade is an empty vessel and will take on the traits of its wielder. Current mana stolen, 0/. Would you like to bond blade of universe to your instrument? Yes, no." "Father, what does this mean? Why is it asking me if I want to bond this blade with my instrument when I don't have one?" Symphony turned back to his father when the man didn't speak up. He saw the man once again have to tear his eyes from his back, and for the first time Symphony looked back to see what his father had continued to look at. "What the sparks?" Symphony reached toward the treasure chest in the shape of a backpack that was connected to his torso, no more heavier than the shirt and jacket he wore underneath it, and gasped when he was able to pull it from his shoulders with a single hand. The straps unclasped when he grabbed the small handle atop its lid, and the square bag was set down silently on its flat bottom. Symphony took in the beautiful bag and wondered where it had come from. It was beautifully crafted with rich black wood and matching black leather straps. White gold metal of an unfamiliar material framed the bag and gave it more than a regal impression, but a divine one. It was then that Symphony's father spoke up. The sound of the man's voice jarred Symphony from his daze, and Symphony tried to clear his head of the growing confusion he faced. "Son, come here." We must leave this place as quickly as possible. It will only remain open for a short time longer, now that the youngest member of our family has chosen an item from its depths. Symphony nodded once more and lifted the backpack back to his shoulders, and was shocked when the clasps closed by themselves back around his shoulders. He selected yes on the red frame that hung in his vision, only for another to replace it. Would you like to store Blade of Universe within the treasure chest of the Pantologist lexicon? Yes, no. When he chose yes, he felt the lid of the bag at his back open. Symphony couldn't help but grin. He didn't know what the item at his back was, nor why the symbol of his family was inscribed across its lid, but as he dipped the tip of the blade into the black void that was the bag's inside, and the blade disappeared, he nearly squealed with excitement. Dad, did you see? Symphony's father shushed him before he could say anything further. Symphony didn't know why, but his father's demeanor changed drastically, and he was now being pulled by his dad out of his family's crypt by the neck. Looks like Phony fumbled it again, boys, said one of the nobles his father carried him past. Symphony couldn't even look in their direction as they laughed at him due to the tight grip around his neck. After a while, his father stopped and let him go. They were far from the entrance to the cemetery, and any who could hear what they said to one another by the time his father spoke up. Where did you receive your instrument, my son? Asked his father simply. Symphony shrugged, but couldn't help but glance at the treasure chest at his back. It was sleek and without bulk, and Symphony wondered what else it could do other than store items, but was forced to focus on the conversation. He itched to draw free the blade he'd just bonded to his instrument, and wondered why he felt slightly drained since he'd bagged the weapon. He rubbed at his eyes momentarily as his father stared him down to dismiss the thoughts. Where have you been since this morning? Your sister yelled for me before I left about you running behind. Was it because of this? His father waved a hand toward his instrument, and Symphony shook his head again. No, father. This morning I ran late because I hadn't completed my chores, so I rushed to clean my mess before I left. Didn't want to become a cultivator. Only to have Mom skin my hide once I got home. Didn't seem very stoic, said Symphony to his father's surprise. The man laughed and shook his head at his son. Where were you when the wave of mana rippled outward from the ceremony then? An image of Symphony's feet atop his own treasure chest flashed into his mind, and Symphony's eyes went wide before he looked away. What is it, child? Spit it out. Symphony struggled to look back at his father. He was ashamed, but with another glance at his back, he wondered if he shouldn't be. I was on top of Grandfather's treasure chest, the one you gave me for safekeeping. I was trying to get the lid to close by jumping on its lid, but when the wave came, I slipped and woke up to the town bell ringing, so I rushed out of my room and toward town, said Symphony ashamedly. His father nodded and wiped his face with a hand before he sighed heavily. Am I to assume that you blinked away the blue boxes that came into your vision when you woke up? Symphony thought for a moment and remembered how hard it had been to clear his vision when he'd first woken up. He felt his stomach drop as he looked up at his father's deadly serious gaze. I might have, by the grace of the maiden's light boy. Do you know what you've done? Symphony merely shook his head in response. You were chosen by our family's first and only ancient artifact, and lost access to all of the knowledge left to you by our ancestors and the gods themselves, my son, said his father. Symphony felt his legs give out. His head spun, and he felt faint as tears filled his eyes. What does that mean for me, father? The question was rhetorical. Symphony knew what was to come the moment he heard his father's words. He was the youngest in his family, and had no rights to claim a treasure tied to his bloodline above his siblings. The only problem was that he was now eternally linked to the same item his siblings were entitled to through right of law and honor-born combat. You will have to fight for the right to lead, my son, or you will be killed, said his father. Tears also filled the man's eyes as Symphony wept before him. But I don't want to lead, father. Sparks, I don't even want to fight Alexandria for scraps of food on the table, let alone an ancient artifact. Maybe it's just an ordinary relic or equipment. Symphony was cut off by his father's sorrowful chuckle as tears dripped free of his chin. You have no choice, my son. Your abilities will make you stand out no matter how ordinary you hope that artifact is. Ancient artifacts are connected to untold power. I doubt you even receive blue boxes as the rest of us do, stated his father. Symphony's look away told his father everything the man wanted to know. By the time he looked to his father once more, Symphony was sad to see his father's back. So what should I do?
Okay. Okay, we getting somewhere, y'all.
Speech unmuted. Vol 1. Chapter 2 on Chapter 3 unwelcome. Pages. Now in Chapter 3 unwelcome. Window copy. Actions available. Format text quickly by voiceover jumping to the formatter.
Symphony
You are
tried to sneak
currently on a
by his
text
mother.
area inside of a page. To add comment, hide headers and footers, jump to page format, and bookmark, press Control, Option, Command, space first to bring up the action
He
menu.
wanted to
Speech muted.
Symphony tried to sneak by. Chapter 3. Unwelcome. Symphony tried to sneak by his mother. He wanted to sneak past the scions of the other noble families. He almost managed to sneak past everyone before he heard a nearby group yell in his direction. "Well, if it isn't phony, how does it feel to still be a fake?" said a boy behind him. He turned around to see his once friend, Armor Archon, surrounded by a group of boys and girls their age. "At least they gave you a nice bag to carry around their goods for them. Where are the rest of the Omen brats anyhow? None wanted to support you today." Symphony wanted to ignore the jibes, but knew he wouldn't get far. His once friend was nothing but persistent and hadn't treated him the same since Symphony luckily managed to beat him in a duel last season's cycle. He once had been inseparable with Armor, but since the loss, the scion hadn't been a friend of any in the Omen family. Symphony later learned through rumors that Armor felt cheated, and that a nameless runt like Symphony would never have been able to beat him in a legitimate duel without some form of cheating. "My siblings are probably already at the dueling yards for testing," said Symphony, before he tried to turn around and leave the group behind. A hand landed on his shoulder, and he sighed when Armor pulled Symphony to face him. The young man wore a smile that told Symphony that he was probably in for trouble. "As a cultivator now, you can't ignore my challenges, can you? Wouldn't want to further ruin your family's reputation, would you?" Symphony took a deep breath after he closed his eyes. His father told him to keep his ancient artifact a secret for as long as he could, but the same laws that jeopardized his safety from his siblings now would force him into a duel. He may not have a claim to lead his family, but unaccented challenges were seen as blemishes on both those who declined and all entities they were tied to, which included sects and honor-born families above all else. "Why waste time with me? Aren't you and your friends a little too beyond my skill level?" Armor merely laughed and unsheathed the glass sword filled with lightning at his hip. "Nonsense. I've heard that your training has improved drastically from my father, but either way I'd like to test your skills. Maybe even give you a few pointers," said Armor with a laugh and a thrust of his new sword. Symphony sighed and found himself headed toward the center of the town's local training yard. Armor and the others laughed when they passed the rock behind the dojo and training yard. Symphony had marked his first loss on the rock with a single line more than 2 season cycles prior, and the ritual had left the stone with almost 1,000 tally marks, alongside 3 X's that symbolized victories. He'd lost every day, sometimes almost a handful of times, to various scions from across the kingdom. Through the use of the capital gate system, travel from town to town within a spire was effortless. This only made the daily swap meets for young scions to train and learn from one another more fearsome. Symphony had traveled every day under the command of his father and mother, which Symphony tried to take pride in. They didn't force him to do much as their unranked child, so the training was one thing that made him feel involved with his family. Still, he dreaded what may come that day. He just hoped the city's elected combat judges hadn't shown up for instrument testing, and instead prepared for the swap meet, coincidentally being held in Omenesk that same day. The judges often played favorites to the ranked scions. Symphony didn't know why. It wasn't as if his rank would change if he won a match. He'd in fact won 3 matches, and nothing had changed in his life. The victories counted as looks, or luck. Additionally, he was often used as a training dummy when combat instructors wanted to have their student perfect a technique. Scions were limited to 3 training matches, 21 swap meet matches, or 37 tournament matches within in a single day. Unranked youths weren't limited by any match limits, as they had no hope to raise their societal rank. Ever, Symphony often found himself on the harshest side of the laws for unranked youths, and the daily warfare had done nothing for him thus far but fill him with pain, weaken his mental state, and leave him with a sense of hopelessness. He felt dread as he strode toward the entrance and couldn't ignore the eyes that gathered as the group walked by. "It's just another loss, Sim. No harm will be done either way." The area was packed to capacity, and Symphony had to ignore the looks he received from his family when he stood in the position across from Armor in one of the many rings set up for duels. He was glad to see only his mother, father, and sister Alexandria had shown up. As much as he would have loved to, had all his siblings see him fight. He knew that they'd long ago given up on him. He didn't win, so showing up as support had long ago died, after it had become known as a sad and hushed matter within the Omen household. Symphony took a deep breath and withdrew the Blade of Universe from his bag. He couldn't help but grin when Armor's eyes went wide at the sight of a sword handle etched with runes appear from thin air. He'd simply lifted his hand toward the lid of his bag and was met by the item he desired with nothing more than a thought. "Wow, looks like your streak of bad luck has ended, hasn't it, phony?" said Armor with a fixed gaze on the blade in his hand. Symphony shrugged. "I did my best to pick my instrument as any other before me has," said Symphony with a presenter's gesture at his new blade. He made sure to speak as loudly as he could to try and make all who saw him believe his instrument was his blade, and not the bag at his back that he noticed received more and more eyes on its unrivaled quality when he moved through the crowd that led toward the training grounds. "No matter. Hopefully your skills have improved enough for you to be worthy of that weapon," said Armor, with a greedy look in his eyes. Symphony felt that the boy would take his blade off his corpse if he had the chance, which was confirmed as Armor spoke before the match started. "How about an instrumental duel?" asked Armor as a referee trotted up to the pair. Symphony shook his head, but to his amazement, Armor smirked anyway. "Judge Emrys, my friend here has just agreed to an instrumental duel. Would you please preside over this match and make sure all rules are followed as they should be?" The older woman bowed to Armor and accepted a handful of gold coins to Symphony's own astonishment. "Why, yes, I can," said Judge Emrys before she turned toward the stands and spoke aloud for all to hear, the sound of coins suppressed by the woman when she cleared her throat to speak. "Next match will begin shortly. We have the Scion of the Archons versus the unnamed Omen child," said Judge Emrys. The masked woman wore the same expressionless white masks that all combat judges wore, framed by curled black strands of silk like hair. Symphony couldn't help but wonder what the woman who just conspired against him looked like. He'd wanted to put up a good fight and concede the match after a good showing. All potential for that was thrown out after Judge Emrys declared their match to be an instrumental duel, which in fact meant that he and Armor now dueled for the right to own each other's weapons. But I never agreed to. Symphony was cut off, and Judge Emrys was the only thing that could be heard above the audience and other judges in the area. The challenge has been accepted. Bets may now begin. Exiting from the ring from this point forward will be considered a loss or forfeit, stated Emrys, before she bowed a final time and backed toward the edge of the ring. When Symphony looked around, all he saw was smiles and smirks. The only ones seemingly unpleased by the turn of events were his stone-faced parents. "Lose and I'll kill you myself," yelled Alexandria from the stands next to his parents. The crowd laughed and Symphony rolled his eyes. He turned back to face Armor and shrugged. It seemed he was going to lose his newest weapon, but even that was far greater than the loss of his backpack. The two boys squared off, and the battle began the moment Emrys gave the signal. Symphony raised his sword into a defensive position, until a mental image popped into his mind with him holding the weapon differently. At first Armor grinned, but as Symphony changed the position of his weapon, his facial expression changed. In fact, Armor's entire body stiffened, and some of the nearby crowd went silent. To Symphony's surprise, Armor rushed him. Their dance of swordplay was lackluster. At first, the two may have been 7 season cycles old, but had held swords and other weapons more than eating utensils up to that point in both their lives. Neither was unskilled. The sound of clashing metal filled the area, and their duel gained more and more observers. The two had never fought with anything more than dulled training weapons made of wood. So it took the two a handful of back and forwards before either felt even slightly comfortable at the much deadlier swordplay. Armor seemed to take larger and larger risks as the fort continued. Symphony couldn't tell if it was because the boy believed he was just that much better of a fighter, or just knew that the judge would heal any true injuries, either gained during the match. But then Symphony remembered that Judge Emrys was being paid, not to follow the rules. Would she heal him from the inevitable lightning burns or stab wound that this match could result in? Or would she let him bleed out all over the ground before another healer could be found? Either way, Symphony needed to figure something out, and quickly. His hand grew numb the more and more his weapon touched Armor's own, and he wondered how long it would take before he simply dropped his weapon and lost a limb, or his very head. To his surprise, Armor, although he was a genius of the sword, had yet to break into his guard. Symphony used his non-dominant right hand, so was slightly confused as to why Armor had yet to disarm him entirely. If it weren't for the persistent images of himself that continued to flash in his head of potential counters, blocks, and even attacks, he might have even been able to disarm Armor. Symphony's own training in the sword momentarily aligned as the two bobbed and weaved around one another, and Symphony's parry was perfectly timed. Symphony couldn't hear a thing but the ring of swords, and his heartbeat in his chest when he was hit with another mental flash. His mind was filled with a maneuver he'd never done, nor even attempted. Regardless, he found himself awed when he slapped the flat of the blade he'd just parried. Sparks ran up his arm from the palm of his free hand, and Symphony struck at his opponent's blade again with his own weapon. The sound of Armor's weapon when it struck the ground was followed by complete silence throughout the entire training yard. Symphony pointed his blade's tip toward the stunned Armor's neck before he looked around at more shocked faces. No one moved, and no one made a sound. Symphony grew worried that he'd forgotten something, until he remembered what he was supposed to do in this situation. He bent, picked up the blade that had been dropped, stabbed it into the floor of the training ground, before he raised his weapon toward Armor once more. "My apologies. This is a first for me," said Symphony. He couldn't help but smile when the gathered audience began to laugh and cheer at him. "Point," said Symphony softly. He then stepped back from Armor's weapon and bowed to the young man. Armor didn't bow in response as ritual called for, but grabbed his blade and nodded once at Symphony. Their match continued, and Symphony tested what would happen if he followed the images that flashed into his mind as they came. To his own amazement, he was able to both keep Armor on the defensive and control the flow of the battle. He almost cornered him a handful of times. Even Alexandria yelled from the side of the ring to Symphony's own surprise. She apparently wanted her little brother to press him and bleed him like a rat. Symphony looked in her direction, but the young woman was too excited to even notice. Then Armor's stance changed, and the flow of combat changed once more. Streams of energy ran down Armor's arms and jumped toward Symphony, even while their pace continued to increase. The crowd once again grew silent, and all that was left in the air was the sound of weapons. Symphony had to ignore a strange object in his vision. The best way he could describe it was as some sort of crescent moon shape that was transparent and filled with light the longer the two fought. The word expel hovered above the energy and pulsed softly. He didn't know what he was supposed to do, but chose to ignore it for now and concentrate on the trade of blows. Armor's strikes started to blur, and Symphony knew that he had long lost the feeling in his right hand. With an incredibly fast combinations of moves that Symphony was nearly able to block successfully, he found himself weaponless, and with a blade at his neck. "Point," said Armor simply. But even as the crowd cheered, Symphony felt the lack of excitement in Armor. Symphony bowed as he was handed his weapon, and the match continued. He wasn't able to hold his weapon as he had at the start of the match, which opened him up to many more attacks. Armor noticed this, and his offense became fierce. In Symphony's own panic and dire want to win, no, need to win, he reached out for anything he could that would help. The word expel popped into his mind, and the moment he recognized the command word, their blades collided. Armor's blade twisted sideways and smacked flat side into Symphony's arm in the same moment that a giant wave of energy spurt forward in a halo from Symphony's blade. Armor was sent flying in one direction, his weapon another, and Symphony dropped the blade of universe at his own feet. In the silence left behind after their clash, two things were immediately understood. The first was that Symphony's arm was broken, and the second was that the match would continue. This was an instrumental duel. "You can back down, phony, no need to lose your life, especially over such a garbage instrument," said Armor as he rose to his feet and gathered his weapon from the other side of the ring. Symphony ignored Armor as he stared down at both his broken arm and his weapon. He tried with his right, but gave in and took his weapon into his left hand and felt it balance for the first time in match, even with the pain of his broken arm. He looked back at Armor and smiled. He lifted his blade toward the Archon Scion and nodded before he spoke, no regard for Armor's earlier comment. "Shall we continue?" The environment changed at his words. As he had just quoted his own father, the only merchant who was known for his skill with the sword, his son's least favorite weapon, the weapon he'd chosen for his family, rather than himself. "You won't win this, phony. Just give up." Symphony shook his head and smiled. His stance widened as the mental image of himself displayed, and there were even gasps that came from the crowd at his lifted swords. The brat claims to know the dance of the sun's tendrils. Bah, utter rubbish. I believed he was holding back all his skills with the sword so far. But this could be nothing but a lie, said an audience member. Yes, but he's never been like this before. There's a wall of notches with how many losses he's taken behind the grounds on the wall. Maybe that was to make us think he was weak, said one of the boys who'd come in with armor. Symphony tilted his head at his ex-friend. He didn't know what style of combat the people talked about, but he doubted he knew it, but maybe his sword did. Symphony was unsure. I don't know what they're talking about, but it seems you won't leave here today with that weapon without becoming my Oathbond second armor, said Symphony playfully. He knew the young man would never do it, so he grew excited to potentially win a sword for his family's treasury. Your loss phony. I wish this could have ended another way. Armor charged at him, and Symphony took a deep breath. He'd noticed the images flowed better in combat when he controlled his breathing, but bodily focus was hard to retain during combat, even for veteran swordsmen. Symphony countered one move after the other. He made sure that their blades were in contact for as long as possible, and was quickly able to confirm his first hypothesis about his new sword. The weapon somehow drank the energy that ran down Armor's sword, and it was what seemed to fill the bar in his vision. He tested his next hypothesis amidst a particularly unsafe backflip Symphony used to gain distance. Upside down and being charged at with his back in his opponent's direction, Symphony triggered his weapon's command word. A golden halo of energy rippled outward with streaks of white lightning that trailed behind it. Symphony landed and dashed forward before Armor could regain his balance. The wave had struck him hard enough to force him to stumble backward, but hadn't been nearly as powerful as Symphony's first use of the triggered ability of his blade. Yet it was still enough to give Symphony an opening. He struck out with a flurry of stabs at vital organs. All were blocked successfully by Armor, but the last strike was accompanied by another pulse of energy from Symphony's blade. Armor's awkward block resulted in his third and final disarm for the match, and the roar from the crowd made Symphony want to cry tears of joy at the sword on the ground he dare not look away from. It was proof that he'd won, proof that settled in his heart and told him that he wasn't a phony. It wasn't until his sister lifted him up into the air and screamed in his face that he stopped crying long enough to smile. It was then that the pain registered in his broken arm, and he wailed in pain momentarily before he was caught up in the celebration brought on by his family and the surrounding crowd. His sister's screams of victory could be heard above all else, as she threw him about in the air and looked him in the eyes. You won.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Huh. Let's see where we at, guys.
Speech unmuted. Header, body, finder. Streamlabs desk, live 0 hours, 58 minutes, and 10 seconds.
Okay. We gave you guys three episodes today of The Life of Symphony Omen. Episode 4 came out today on RoyalRoad. So if you're interested in reading that before we link back up for more episodes of Symphony next week, let us know, or check it out yourself and let us know your thoughts. Leave comments. Vote for Symphony if this is the character you enjoy and want to see more of, because I'll give bonus chapters the more a character is voted for each week on EpestemicLibrary.com. Yeah. Other than that, I hope you guys had a good time. I had a good time. I like those episodes, and getting caught up on these characters is a lot of fun just because I don't want to give up on them. I know a lot of people write stuff and then put it aside, but there's nothing. I know that this isn't edited and this was done a long time ago, but it's still okay for just getting my thoughts out there, you know what I mean? And that's what I need people to see about their writing. It's good, you know what I mean? Like sometimes it's not good and it needs work, but you may not be on the path where you put out a chapter every week. What if you put out a chapter every month? In 12 months, you have a book. I know that it may not seem that way, but that well processed work is going to show more for you and what you got going on than even some of my work will, because you went back and you went through it and you made sure your prose were right, and your editing, and your punctuation, and your grammar, and your flow, and your, you know what I mean? Like, I write for passion, so I'm writing for my joy first, and then for you all next. Like, I do want to make quality work, let's be real. I don't want to just put out garbage. I want to not only enjoy my ideas, but I want them to be accepted, not because they're just filled with tropes, but accepted because I worked on them hard enough that people understand the uniqueness of every single one of my stories. So, yeah. But, yeah. This was a lot of fun. I miss Symphony. I can't wait to show you guys more of the pantologist, the pantologist bag. I cannot wait for that. That bag has some really cool elements. Symphony is actually the first character that gets to develop a shield bow for his family. Arson ends up doing that later in life for his series, and then we have another character that creates a shield bow completely out of like intangible elements, which was really it's a pretty interesting version of the shield bow. So I can't wait for that to be shown in that's Icarus Gray. That's his series, but he's not going to come for a while because his storyline needs a lot of development. It's really crazy and obscene. So, yeah, don't worry about that now. We'll just shove that in the background. But no, if you enjoyed today, please subscribe. Please come back tomorrow because I'll be streaming again tomorrow. Streaming 7 days a week, guys. Yeah. And I want to build more of this writers group and allow you guys to come in and talk more and dedicate time to talking at the beginning, talking at the end, sharing thoughts and ideas, things that you're trying as writers that you found to be successful, things that I've done and can show you the success of, and that kind of stuff. So yeah, good energy, guys. This was great. I didn't get to write anything today, which is crazy because I write every day normally, but I was so tired today at work that I fell asleep in a chair. So when I get done here, I'm gonna call my fiance, check on her, make sure she's okay, get some good sleep, and then wake up in the morning, and when I'm working at the snack bar, get some writing done while I help my head cashier prep for the day and stuff. So yeah, I'm really excited for tomorrow, and I can't wait, guys. Please be good to yourselves. Please get some writing done today. And may the mania... tongue tie. May the mana be with you, my fellow cultivators. It's been real. I hope you enjoy the stories. I hope you guys are being brave, taking chances, try something new, especially in your writing.
End stream button. You are.
Until we speak again, I love you, my fellow cultivators. Sorry, I'm tired and tongue-tied. I do love you guys.